In today's video, we're going to be diving into the upcoming pattern where we still have the threat of not only one, but a couple or even a few chances of major snowstorms leading up to Christmas. We're going to be discussing that today with our up-to-date modeled guidance. Also, things continue to look colder and colder every single day, where confidence is really increasing that we're going to have a cold pattern going into Christmas as well, which is indicative. It's really supporting the snowfall chances, of course. So we knew there was going to be cold air, but it's looking colder and colder every single day. So we're going to be going over that. Now, quickly as we dive into things, I want to take a look here at our previous 14 days here of basically our temperatures over the past 14 days. And what we see is a pretty substantial amount of cold over these pockets over the past 14 days, which is the final day of November and then the first 13 days here of December. The darker blues are about 6, 7, 8, 9 degrees below normal. So we are seeing pretty substantial departures from normal, especially in this area, but generally colder over this first portion of December for all of these regions. You can totally tell where they're coming from too and where they're going. You can see that we've been seeing these cooldowns dive in through this kind of northern plains, upper Midwest area, and particularly targeting the Ohio Valley, Mid-Atlantic, and Southeast corridors. We've been quite neutral for a lot of the West, but when we kind of look at a bigger picture here, it's clear that there's been overall a positive PNA in place, which basically just means warmer temperatures over the western regions of North America. This causes the opposite to take place east of it, which we also see has taken place, obviously. So, in other words, this is what we've been predicting, what we were expecting, and sure enough, it's panned out that way. Let's take a look here at the GFS model. We're going to be looking at the 12Z model run today. A little less snowy than the 18Z run, which I also want to show you guys a little bit of. I typically use the 0Z and 12Z model guidance because 6Z and 18Z runs are reruns of the 0Z and 12Z runs, so they're not full original brand new runs. They're kind of like reusing information from the previous one. That doesn't make it really any less accurate, but I like to get the full models opinion, and I feel like you get the best results with the 0 and 12Z runs. So if you ever notice that I don't use the 18Z runs a lot, that's why. As we take a look, I'm going to move us past today, really not a whole lot going on, but when we move towards tomorrow on Saturday, December 14th, we have plenty of snowfall out west for the Rockies, Sierra Nevada, and the Cascades here. So all of your major western mountain ranges, they're experiencing some pretty heavy snowfall. We do have a very weak low here between Kansas and Missouri. A little bit of a cold front look out ahead of things. Maybe a warm front somewhere in there, but I'm not really seeing it too much. We do have snowfall and icy conditions for areas of Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, Illinois, and then maybe some thunderstorms and showers happening here to the south and east of it. As we just keep going towards Sunday, we see that we are going to be experiencing some eastern snowfall sooner rather than later. Sunday, around the afternoon hour, we're seeing some of this for West Virginia, Western Virginia, Maryland, and Pennsylvania, as well as New York there. So we see some of that setting up for the east. As we keep going towards Monday on the 16th, we see that that system kind of moves out. We see some snow showers for New England, but they're pretty sparse. We see a more substantial low for Michigan with a cold front underneath. A little bit more of a warm front look here to the northeast of it. So definitely very, very interesting. We also see cold air diving in behind this feature as well. So again, this is Monday the 16th. Taking a look out west, we still have snowfall up here in the northwest corridor of the nation, and we really don't have a positive PNA look per se yet. We kind of have this wavy jet stream across the United States. It looks like a roller coaster here where we have warmer air trying to battle with the cold here in the west, but a lot of cold also pushing back from the north, and the warmth is going to win out eventually. We see that the cold gets a little bit more of a break here over the central states. And then warmer air is surging out ahead of this cold front here that we have over the Midwest area. This is very typical stuff. Let's take a look at what we see by Tuesday. And this is when this positive PNA starts to win out. We start to see some warmer temperatures moving up the west coast. This is usually the very beginning signs of a positive PNA. The cold is starting to take aim more at the central states and eastern states rather than the full-on west. And it looks like everything's going to slide into place. And when we look at our jet stream overall, I mean, it is ascended a little bit there over the west coast, but very flat after that point. This is clearly a fork in the road where we're going to see some big changes here after the 17th. And for the 18th, again, beginning signs of a positive PNA. 1 day later, we have a full-blown positive PNA. So it's really important to be able to understand those signals of a starting positive PNA, because just 24 hours later, we have a full-blown positive PNA. High pressure, no precipitation, and warmer temperatures taking over. Meanwhile, to the east of this, we see cold air diving southward. I mean, really, really intruding here on these north central states. And again, this will be headed eastward. We see a lot of precipitation around the boundary here, very typical. So perhaps some thunderstorms, definitely heavy showers in here. Wouldn't be surprised if there's some isolated or scattered thunderstorms in this area, as things are a little bit more mild in here by Wednesday. Let's take a look at what happens overnight. I'm going to take us just step by step, but by 1 a.m. on Thursday, December 19th, we have heavy snowfall taking over for Vermont, New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio here. This is not our snowstorm from yesterday, by the way. This is the one before it. If you watched yesterday's video, there was 2 pretty hefty snowstorms, and this is storm number 1 of those 2. As we move on just an hour, we're going to see that snow start to expand a lot more. Now we're mostly talking about New York and New England, but we still have snowfall for Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Ohio, and even now down through portions of Kentucky and Tennessee. Let's take a look at just a couple of hours later at 7 a.m. And again, heavy snowfall in New England, New York, down through West Virginia, Ohio, Kentucky, Tennessee. And really the temperature pattern is pretty warm over most of the west. And then we see this really deep diving but sharp trough. And what I mean by sharp is it's not very wide. It's a very narrow and pointy looking trough. And that's going to indicate pretty intense cold air in this pocket for the morning of Thursday, December 19th. And we see that snowfall just kind of continue. This is when things get interesting. We've had kind of broad low pressure around this pocket here for this entire storm. You notice there's no L's anywhere. What we're going to see is a low begins to form offshore here in a moment, and this is going to intensify the snowstorm in general. So we see offshore Virginia and North Carolina. Still, this is snowstorm number 1, like I mentioned, but this starts to get things going. As that low intensifies, we should experience an intensification of this precipitation where we're still having snowfall basically up and down the Appalachian mountain range by this point, and even expanding into areas outside of those mountains also, of course. Cold air now diving as far south as Georgia and South Carolina. Continue to see that snowfall. It slides eastward. We even get some flakes flying in my neck of the woods for Virginia and North Carolina. Probably wouldn't accumulate in this case, 4 a.m. on Friday, but some flakes could be flying for multiple hours. Even the Delmarva, New Jersey, that one moves out as a 989. And then what we see after this point here is Friday into Saturday. This is Friday at the 7 p.m. mark. We have a very vertical positive PNA here. Very intense as well. It's reaching far up into Canada. And this means that this trough is likely going to reach far down into the east as it moves in. We see that the first trough has kind of lightened up. It kind of softly moved out, but we have another kind of resurgence of this colder air that's really, really moving in for Saturday. Meanwhile, there's snow showers, even some of them heavy for the Great Lakes and Ohio Valley, but watch this cool down move in. This is the early hours of Saturday on December 21st, again, just before Christmas. And again, this very kind of northern positive PNA reaching far to the north indicates that we're going to see a trough reaching far to the south, to the east of it. The more intense this western feature is, as a rule of thumb, the more intense the trough will be to the east of it. And that kind of rings true here in this case. What we see happening is some low pressure forming offshore of North Carolina, just like yesterday. The only thing is we're going to see some differences in the location, especially on this run. But the cold air is there. We see it reaching the Gulf Coast again for Alabama, Mississippi, Florida Panhandle here. It is plenty cold for snowfall throughout a lot of these spots. Let's watch this play out. That low forms, but there's very, very broad low pressure throughout a lot of those areas. And the problem with this is it brings warmer temperatures to the middle layers of the atmosphere. So even if at the surface, let's say it's like 28 degrees, it might be 34 up there in the upper levels where there's a lot of low pressure in here. And that would cause mixing. That would cause rainfall probably in that case. So we want to see a tight, consolidated low pressure system here for pure snowfall to occur. And the other problem is this low kind of was right here, but it kind of recycles back on shore over Virginia, and that's going to cause more of those mixing issues, as I mentioned. We do get snowfall in a lot of these pockets, but it's messy. New England getting the most here in this case. I would say some of Pennsylvania, West Virginia, as well as Virginia getting also quite a bit. That one moves out. We see snow showers pretty far to the south, but that low is over the land big time. Still, though, like we talked about yesterday, the important fact here is there is still a storm. So many people, yesterday's video was very controversial. I don't think for anybody that watched the video in its full length, it was controversial, but just for people seeing the thumbnail and everything, it's really important to watch the video. But with all that being said, so many people were like, this is going to be gone by tomorrow. And it's not. It's still here. I never was one to say, I was saying the opposite really during the video yesterday. I was saying it is going to change a lot. Every single run, we're going to see big changes. It might end up looking like that in the end, but we're going to see shifts back and forth. If you guys watched yesterday's video, you know that's exactly what I was saying. And we saw a big change, but what I am confident in, not even super confident yet, but confidence is growing that there will be a storm and likely a snowstorm for some folks. It's just where is that going to set up is the huge question. But the valuable information here, even beyond 10 days, is that these models are consistently showing a storm, which is huge. That is a key part to the puzzle as we look at the long range. Things do get milder here for a couple of days, especially the 24th, Christmas Eve. Christmas Day, we see this cold start to kind of move back in. And then look at this, 26th, 27th, we do get a little bit of a, I wouldn't even call it a southern slider. It's more like a mid-Atlantic slider here through Western Virginia, Western Virginia, even into some of Eastern Virginia there. Kind of a Virginia special, honestly. And again, very long range, kind of just a signal. Could move around a lot. We could see this shift back and forth, north, south, east, west, all over the place. But we'll see if that consistently shows a storm like that. Temperature pattern becomes a little bit more uncertain later on. So we get a little bit milder with still some cold air along the eastern seaboard, but that's about all. Now the 18Z run. This is the newer run, like I mentioned, but in my opinion, the 12Z and 0Z runs are typically best. Doesn't mean the 18Z should be thrown in the trash, but a lot of people, for instance, in yesterday's video, I used the 12Z guidance. They were like, well, the 18Z model did away with it, but I don't really find the 18Z to be super reliable. So I got to stay consistent with that, whether it's showing a storm or not, obviously. But here we go. Friday the 20th, same exact cold. Saturday the 21st here, except watch this storm. It develops offshore there. Still very broad, but none of that broad low pressure is over the United States. And we see eastern Pennsylvania, Maryland, Delaware, southern New Jersey getting heavy snowfall, even starting for southern New England as well. And as we move a couple of hours forward, we see this gets much heavier. The low becomes much more consolidated, as I mentioned, over here offshore. And we see Delaware, Maryland, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York City, the rest of southern New York, southern New England here, getting heavy snowfall through Sunday the 22nd morning time. And we see this go all the way up the coast. Really, really intense. We'll look at the total snowfall in a moment, but look at this cold after this as well. The depth of this East Coast cold air. It is expanding far down into Florida, Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama. This is true Arctic air moving over the East Coast around Christmas. Just like its 12Z predecessor, we do see a warming pattern overall. Around Christmas, some cooldowns for the East Coast, especially here between the 27th and 28th. Maybe could see a storm during that time frame, but this is very far out. That's hard to say for sure, but that's a bit of a storm signal right here as well for after Christmas. This could easily shift again in any direction, but if this storm signal was consistent, we'd be watching for something in the long range. As we take a look at the European model here, I'm going to go over our snowstorms in particular. We see that for the 18th here, 19th, 20th, we do get a setup for a storm. We just don't get that low pressure offshore, really. We get snowfall briefly in this northeast corridor, but we really don't get it to come together quite as good. We do get this offshore low developing, but it's the 20th, not the 21st or 22nd, so this is all rain for right now. That moves out, and then we get the cold air. There is some low pressure left behind here. As you can see, this would be storm number 2 basically trying to develop. We do get snow showers, including lake effect snowfall here in the northeast, but the storms just move in way too quick before the cold air. So that's one of our scenarios where we would end up with a lot less snow if something like that was to happen. But we do get the same amount of cold here, as you can see. We do get both the storms, as you can see right here, just coming in too early before the cold. So that's why we look at these ingredients like the cold, the storms. Those have been consistent on the models. We know those two things are likely coming. Will they come together is the huge question, and we need to continue to track all of this model guidance to find the answer, basically. Total precipitation, the Northwest is on the increase here. We do see a lot more here for this Northwest corridor. Also, some of the South Central states up through the Northeast, Great Lakes, Ohio Valley, Mid-Atlantic, really looking good. I know a lot of these areas need a lot of precipitation. This looks really great. When we look at the anomalies, we do start to see a lot more above average precipitation here in the Northwest, which is good news for them. They've been a bit drier for a while now. And then again, also this kind of Midwest, Ohio Valley, Mid-Atlantic, Northeast corridor does also pretty tremendously. Still, it's this deep south into the southeast pocket that's struggling. So we'll have to wait and see what ends up happening because this area really, really needs the precipitation in particular. They're the ones that have really not seen it come in a long time. Here is the 12Z GFS from today. We see major inland snowfall over the course of multiple storms here. Potentially 10 inches plus, maybe even pushing 20 over the course of all the storms for these mountainous areas. The mountainous west does tremendous, and we also see a bit here for the upper Midwest and northern plains, but you know, I would say mildly plowable. When we look at the east here, we see these huge amounts. Let's switch over to the positive snowfall depth change. This is actually what this model would predict to accumulate, and sure enough, we do get really decent amounts in here, but I would say 1 foot to 15 inches is a max here. Maybe pushing 2 feet there for the mountains of West Virginia, which always tend to do really well when others typically don't. Smoky Mountains, you know, we see 10 inches in there. Basically, your entire Appalachian mountain range here seeing 10 inches plus over the course of the next 15 days. So this could be really huge. Seeing flakes in these areas, but again, nothing accumulating on this particular model. But when we look at the 18Z run, this is for the Northeast because this is where we see the most snowfall. Still, this Virginia, North Carolina area doesn't get anything like we saw yesterday. Again, expect big changes, quoting myself yesterday, which I hate because I live in this area. But we see that a lot more of the East Coast here does better on this 18Z run, like Maryland, Delaware, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Southern New York, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts. These are the areas that on this run, I'll switch us to the Northeast view here too, so we can kind of do side by side, but look at the 18Z run versus the 12Z run, and there's a massive difference there, especially along the coast. Really, there's a big difference most everywhere that's low elevation here, where we do really tremendous through this pocket in here, kind of like eastern Mid-Atlantic, southern New England, even coastal Maine doing a little bit better than this model run. So expect us to move back and forth. This is not going to be, you know, we can't really expect the models to show the same exact thing every single run, every single day when we're 10 days out. For something in about the 7 to 10 to even 15 day mark to be correct, you're going to see it go back and forth multiple times. But just a quick story to share some experience with you guys. This is before my YouTube days. I was probably 14, 15, paying attention to the weather just as much as I do today. I just wasn't talking to anybody about it. Nobody trusts a 13 or 14-year-old about the weather, let's be real. But I was tracking the weather, and we had a snowstorm, a major snowstorm for my neck of the woods pop up in like January of 2013 on the models about 7 or 10 days out. And it was there for maybe 2 runs for my area in one day, and then it went away for a couple of days. It went inland, north. You know, the storm signal was still there, as I've mentioned throughout this video, but it went north. And then I remember when it was about 5 days away or 4 days away, those models chipped back and brought it right back over to my neck of the woods again. And all of a sudden, the snowstorm was on. And funny enough, the results ended up being quite similar to that initial like 10-day outlook from the models. in the end, but it took a lot of back and forth to get there. So even if a model is correct in the long range, you can expect it to kind of falter on its opinion multiple times before it finally nails it down. So it's going to be a battle. We got to buckle up for these types of snowstorms. And if this winter is anything like I think it could be, we might be doing this, multiple times through December, January, February, March, and I just cannot wait. Let's look at the European model's total snowfall. Clearly, if you watch the video, you know that this is going to be a little more underwhelming than the GFS. But for the West, it is a little bit more intense, actually. We're seeing feet of snowfall for the Rockies, Sierra Nevada, Cascades, all these mountain ranges doing great. Again, Northern Plains, Upper Midwest, still just inches to maybe up to like 6, 7, 8 inches over the next 15 days. Little underwhelming for them. We do see lake effect snowfall here as well, as we've been predicting. But when we look at the East, this is the 18Z run. It doesn't get all the way to the 15-day mark. This is actually only 5 days. So let's look at the full 12Z run here. That's the problem. That's why you'll never see me use a 6Z or 18Z run of the European model run, is it doesn't actually get to the full 360 hours out. So that's a huge flaw with this one on the 6Z and 18Z run. So I'll always use the 12Z runs on this, unless they change that one day, which just recently, actually, the European model got extended from 240 hours up to 360 like a month or two ago. So, these models do change. They do update the features kind of sometimes. So we do see a good amount through the Appalachian Mountain Range. Nothing like the GFS model was showing on either run, but maybe a good 6 to 10 inches over the next 15 days for West Virginia, Central Pennsylvania, areas of upstate New York, Green Mountains, White Mountains there, Northern Maine, very mountainous up there as well. So these mountainous areas do quite well on this model run as well. When we look into the temperature pattern, here's our initial cool down. Kind of warms up here, especially for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but again, Thursday, our famous cool down day of this year, apparently. We see this colder air moving in. Here's Friday, and here's the kind of resurgence of it Saturday, Sunday. Look at that brutal cold air for the south. That's really, really intense. And we actually continue to see the East Coast staying cool through the end of the model run. It's mostly these areas that warm over the course of the kind of after Christmas time frame. But these areas kind of stay cold the entire model run, which that's how the summer went. That's how the fall went. And I wouldn't be surprised if we continue to see these kind of East Coast backdoor cold fronts move throughout the winter as well. European model run, let's see what this agrees or disagrees with. Here's, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday cool down, resurgence of it on Saturday, Sunday. Look at the deep Arctic air. It's not as intense as the GFS, but we still get really intense cold air around that 20th, 22nd, 23rd time frame, just like the GFS model. And we see really good agreement on that as well. So I am feeling very confident that we are going to see much colder times ahead about a week from now. What we see is that does stick around for the East Coast. It does warm up actually on this European model run though, but look at this. It's warm from coast to coast. This is a pretty rare pattern. I'm a little doubtful that we'll end up seeing this. I think it'll either be cold in the west or cold in the east, but not warm in both. This is quite uncommon. Anyway, with all that being said, be sure to subscribe. We upload every single day, and we're going to be going over all of these things with you guys for the coming days and weeks. The snowstorms, the cold air. We're going to be tracking every single model run with you guys to make sure we get to the bottom of what's going to happen. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be a roller coaster, as I mentioned. But if you are cool with that, be sure to buckle up because it's going to be a roller coaster, like I mentioned. You can even hit the bell icon for daily notifications when we upload so you never miss one. Be sure to like the video if you did enjoy it. Leave a comment down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.